You're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. I'm your host, Shane Darby. In this episode, we revisit our ODG series, and I'm very pleased to welcome friend of the pod, Eddie McIntosh, to the show today to explore some of the life and times of Eddie Hackett. When thinking about the links courses of Ireland and Great Britain, we must remember that for the 50 years following on from Mackenzie Ross's post-World War II renovation of Turnberry, the only people that designed and built new links courses were Eddie Hackett and Pat Ruddy. In addition to building links courses such as Connemara, Waterville, Enniscrone, Donegal, Carn and Dingle, Hackett would also assist in the spread and democratisation of the game throughout Ireland through his design or revision of over 100 golf courses. We look at the Hackett design style and the constraints that many of his projects had. We also take a look at some of the revisions that have been made to his links courses over more recent times. Eddie McIntosh is currently the consulting architect at Hackett's opus, namely Carn Golf Links in Belmullet, County Mayo, where he designed the Kilmore 9, which opened for play in 2018. The Kilmore is open every other day as a composite 18 known as the Wild Atlantic Dunes course, which combines with the original Hackett back nine. If you've not been to Carn Golf Links, Enniscrone, Murva, Connemara or Waterville, you really need to rectify that. Many thanks to Ali for his time. We really do hope you enjoy the show. Hi Ali, you're very welcome once again to the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. A third timer.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Shane. It's good to be back as well, talking about something different.
Yeah, as I said, it's a while since you've been on the pod. I know you've recently returned from your first golf trip to the Liverpool area. How'd it go? Where'd you play? Did you glean any noticeable takeaways from the trip?
That was good, yeah. It was great. It was a big gap in my golfing CV in GB&I in Great Britain and Ireland, I suppose, was the northwest of England. So I saw Birkdale, I saw Lytham, which are obviously fantastic, and I really wanted to see Formby and Hillside as well. And then I had Delamere Forest, which was a kind of a surprise add-on and was fantastic for an inland course. Really surprised me. The topography there was magnificent. So it was a great trip. 5 different kinds of golf courses.
Did you get some half decent weather?
Some half decent. We had a lovely day. We had a lovely 36-hole day with Delamere and Formby, playing Formby into the evening. That was great. We had some drizzle at Birkdale, which was unfortunate, but it was, the course more than makes up for the drizzle, that's for sure.
Well, glad to hear you enjoyed yourself. Look, we'll undoubtedly touch upon some of the work you've recently been undertaking at Carn and Strandhill. However, obviously, our main event this evening is a dive into the life and times of Eddie Hackett. He appears to have had 2 distinct careers in golf. Initially as apprentice to a master club builder, a teacher, head professional, and indeed a golf pro for hire. For the purposes of the episode, we are specifically interested in the later part of his working life. However, you might provide us with some introductory remarks on Hackett's early years.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Well, he was born in Dublin in 1910. He wasn't really from an affluent background, and he spent a lot of his childhood in ill health, really. But he became a member of Hermitage Golf Club in 1927, so he started playing golf, maybe earlier than that, but he joined Hermitage when he was 17. And he turned pro, he says, in 1932 on advice of his surgeon to take up an outdoor life. He was only playing off a 5 handicap at the time, actually, when he turned pro. So as you know well, Shane, he spent 2 years as assistant to Fred Smith at Royal Dublin, your own course. He went over to Johannesburg for a while and was assistant pro there for a couple of years. Then he came back to Elm Park and he took up the professional position in Elm Park from 36 to 39. And then he successfully applied for the professional job in Portmarnock in 1939. And he spent 11 happy years there. In his own words, he was very happy in Portmarnock and remained very attached to Portmarnock until he died. But he'd settled in there just when World War II broke out. So there was a few hard years. Of course, he made friends with many people there. Played a lot of golf with the great amateurs of the time: Joe Carr, Jimmy Bruin, Cecil Ewing. Became friends with Guppy Cairns, who was kind of Portmarnock head honcho at the time, and did a bit of design work there himself in the 20s. And then he moved out of golf in 1950 for a while. He was helping his brother in his brother's business, and he himself, Hackett, contracted meningitis in 1954 and spent 10 months in Clonskeagh Hospital. And coming out of that, he actually bought a tobacconist shop, thinking that his golfing days were over. So he ran a tobacconist shop for about 7 years. But he sold the shop in the early 60s to become a traveling pro. So he said, that golf was, as you can imagine, golf was calling him still. And he became a traveling pro and started giving lessons. I don't know if it was for the GUI or just on his own back, but he started giving lessons around the country in the early 60s. So that was kind of his life up until he first got the call to design a golf course.
I know there's an interesting story as to how Eddie first got involved in golf course architecture. You might just share it with us.
Well, at the time when he was traveling around the country as a traveling pro, Bill Menton was the secretary of the golfing union at that time, and he was a good friend of Eddie's, and he just phoned him out the blue to say that Malahide needed an architect to advise if land was suitable to extend the course to 18 holes. Malahide at the time, it's moved, of course, since. And Hackett, in his inimitable way, kind of said, "I'm not your man. I know nothing about golf design." And Menton apparently just said, "Look, you're long enough in the game to know how." And that was that. So he had recommended Hackett to Malahide, and Hackett gave it a go. He gave it a go with Malahide, and that was his first job. And he went from there. Actually, his next couple of jobs were easier, he says, because they were just small private 9-hole courses with Rockwell College down in Tipperary and Clongowes Wood College. So relatively straightforward, rudimentary golf courses. And he did a lot of coaching with those schools and other schools as well.
Internationally, obviously, Hackett is best known for his many links golf courses that are dotted around the wide Atlantic Way on the western seaboard of Ireland. I think maybe as a starting point, you might summarize what best defines Hackett's designs and how his approach differed from what maybe we see today.
I think his approach, it followed necessity in some way because there wasn't much money in Ireland at the time. What Hackett says is he became lucky in many ways, right? Bill Menton had phoned him up, but the Irish golf boom had happened post World War II. So you had things like Jimmy Bruin winning the amateur at Birkdale in '46, Fred Daly winning the Open, the British Open in Hoylake in 1947. You had a bunch of the great amateurs. We just mentioned a few of them making the Walker Cup team. Harry Bradshaw coming second in the Open. So all of this kind of stuff was really causing a boom, and a little bit more affluence in the country as well, causing a boom in golf through the late 40s and the 50s. It came, I think, to a conclusion in 1960 when the Canada Cup, or the World Cup as it became known, and Sam Snead and Arnold Palmer came to Portmarnock on a really sunny, gorgeous weekend, and it kind of really clicked with the public at that time. There had only at the time there were 212 clubs affiliated with GUI, and there'd only been 22 built in the previous 30 years. So it was quite obvious that a whole bunch of courses needed to be built to keep up with the demand. And there still wasn't a huge amount of money. So his design style in some ways was necessarily following low budget builds, but he's got his own preferences. There's no doubt about it. Like he builds long golf courses, or he built long golf courses. When we touch on all of the various links courses he did down the western seaboard, you'll find that they're all over, or most of them are over 7,000 yards at a time 40 or 50 years ago, where the open courses weren't over 7,000. I always remember when I was growing up, Carnoustie was the only one over 7,000, and it was the beast, you know. But he designed Waterville, Enniscrone, Donegal, Merva was 7,300 yards, and for many, many years was the longest course in Great Britain and Ireland. So he designed long golf courses where he could. He was, after all, a professional golfer, and that suited him. He worked on low budget, so he didn't like touching the land a huge amount anyway. He always felt that it would disrupt the soil profile. You had to work with what was given you, and I think that's something that we need to always consider now and live by. He really was a true minimalist. He didn't really like blind shots, but because he didn't disrupt the land too much, he ended up with some blind shots. But he raised his green sites up. You'll know in quite a few of his golf courses that he's got kind of plateau greens or up on ledges, and that was to get visibility. His bunkering wasn't particularly strategic. They tended to be put there as targets more than anything, to show you the way. But he really was natural in the way he routed his golf courses, and he's routed some fantastic golf holes. And because he doesn't do much with the land, and he wasn't afraid to move dunes where he had the money and where they had the time and where he had to, because he hasn't done much and he hasn't stripped all the soil off. Um, his courses really do feel like they're 100, 150 years old. They really are undateable, I guess.
Maybe if we take a look at Connemara, 1973, Connemara Golf Links near Clifton in County Galway. It's probably as
Yeah.
good a place to start to begin our focus on some specific Hackett projects.
Yeah, I think so. I think specifically because it really was the initial low budget West of Ireland links course build. It was generated by Father Peter Waldron, who graduated from Maynooth College in 1968 and was posted to Clifton. And there was at the time there was poor economy, it was poor farming land, as we know in Connemara. You've got all of these the Connemara rock and boulders there. The fishing industry was dying a bit. Tourism was in its infancy. And Waldron was a keen golfer, so he was there, the end of Connemara, West Coast, nothing much to do with himself other than his vocation, and he started looking around for a suitable site. And in June 1969, he wandered down that Ballyconneely Road, and he saw that great prairie. I'm not sure it's a Macker landscape, but it's like a Macker landscape down there, where it's just acres and miles of kind of great, subtle linksland, probably being grazed, I imagine. So you can see you can see the movement in the land. And he saw it and he knew immediately he'd found the spot that he wanted to build the golf course. So he joined forces with local businessmen. He led negotiations with 22 landowners for that area. It was owned by 22 landowners. And then, given that Eddie Hackett had been building one or two golf courses before then, he was kind of the natural guy to go to. And that was really in 1972 when they were building the course. They used Joe Clark, who was a local builder, to do some of the landscaping for £365. That was Joe Clark's initial fee, 365. And then they got the clubhouse built. Apparently it was a little bit of a hatchet job, and the first clubhouse had a rock that stuck, one of those Connemara boulders that stuck up through the floor of the bar, so they kind of built it around a huge boulder. But anyway, the community made it happen, and they made it happen with no government grant, which was a huge thing because it was a poor community at the time. And they were up and running, as you say, by 1973. So that was a real plus for the economy, plus for the community, and it really showed a kind of can-do attitude for everyone local just getting behind it.
I have to admit that Connemara is a black spot. I haven't been there myself, so I have heard that there's a great back nine. I know there's 27 holes there. How would you? I have actually heard as well that the third nine may be a little bit cramped for space.
Yeah, it is. It's not the same quality. There's a few reasons. They've made a couple of changes to that over the years. In fact, Hackett. So if we start with the main 18, the back nine is superb, especially as you come around 12 onwards. It's just a great, great finish. The landscape is subtle in so much as it's over this kind of prairie, fescue landscape. it's got the boulders all over the place, Connemara Rock, and Eddie Hackett was particularly proud, of the fact that they never had to move a single rock. So he repeated that a few times. They never moved one rock as he routed in and around all of it. But it adds immeasurably to the kind of feel of the place. You have that Connemara feel out on the golf course as well. The back nine itself is superb. 12 goes up the hill. 13 is this wonderful long par three across a kind of ravine almost into the side of a hill. And then 14, 17, and 18 are all par fives and all very different to each other and cracking holes. Hackett then did come, so that was 73. Hackett then did come back and started on that third nine in 1995. So he was still rolling around the fields in 1995 trying to route it. I think he started with three holes on the coastline, and that's something the main 18 doesn't do. It doesn't go right next to the coastline. So that was a huge addition. But I think there's only two there now, and I think the second one was shortened as well. So I think there must have been some changes or some safety issues with the road that's running down to the beach there. But anyway, as Hackett never got to finish it because he died, and Pat Ruddy and Tom Craddock came in and finished it.
Maybe if we take a look at Hackett's work at Waterville, also in the early 70s, I think it took place around the same time as the Connemara project. However, it does not seem to have had many of the constraints that a typical Hackett project would have had to contend with, i.e. it had a few quid.
It did have yeah, it's almost as opposite as you can get. I mean, we're not talking huge budget JP McManus at Adair here, but we're talking, in the context of the time, Waterville had the budget. Maybe it didn't initially have the budget. I think the history with Waterville, of course, was that, as you know, Shane, there was golf played there from 1889 with the Transatlantic Commercial Cable Company, and they were kind of dotting around. And as that started to die around the Second World War, as a company, golf itself went on the decline, and I think the golf course remained, but it was hardly played or hardly used. Then Jack Mulcahy, who was an Irish-American millionaire from the chemical business, came back to Ireland from America in the 1960s, and he bought the main Waterville estate there in 1968, which had well-known fishing rights, and he apparently was a kind of man about town. He knew a lot of American movie stars, sports stars, all the rest of it. Charlie Chaplin would go there for his fishing at the time, and he bought that estate, and he started to look into developing the golf course. But he wasn't at the time that interested in developing the golf course. But Hackett was brought in. He'd only designed 2 courses at a time, and the college courses. And Mulcahy at that time was living back in the States or traveling between, and Hackett was phoning him and reporting to him in the States. But he said there was no real interest from Mulcahy until he came back over, saw the land, saw what Hackett was trying to do, and in Hackett's words, he became mesmerized. So as soon as he came over, he decided to stay. This is Mulcahy now, stayed from April to October that summer to supervise, and he became very, very involved. But with all of his celebrity friends, he was saying, this is in 1972, October 72, we're going to grand opening in 1973. And he told everyone. So there was no going back on it. And Hackett was quite alarmed at this because he had to get the course ready in 6 months. And it needed a bit of a different approach. They'd been stripping a lot of the grass off. They'd been moving a fair amount of soil there anyway, because there was budget that you talked about. So he had to move quite a lot to get rid of a lot of the dunes. It's quite big dunes in the back, and they'd been doing a lot of work there in those final 12 holes to take dunes down. But he was never going to get it open in 6 months with all of this open sand there. So he then needed significant money to bring in peat turf as topsoil, to bring that in over the winter to hold down the sand. And that was a kind of different approach for Hackett, bringing in exported topsoil and having so much area exposed to hold down and to try and grow in again, as opposed to just mowing out that he did with a lot of his other links courses. So that was it. That was the history really with Waterville. Definitely more money there.
And did that approach, I know you weren't around back then, but or certainly not in Waterville anyway. Did that approach affect the playability, you think, near early days? I mean, if they're bringing in topsoil on the Links golf course, that
I'd
sounds like
say,
pretty
I'd say,
heavy soil introduced.
I'd say it did. Yeah, it has to. Again, if you go back to what I said at the beginning, where Hackett himself said he didn't like to disturb the soil profile, and when you're dealing with sand dunes, fescue landscape, it's always the best way. In fact, you could argue it's almost the best way on any landscape. It's a lot harder inland when you got to build drainage into it. But once you disrupt the soil profile, you are disrupting the natural drainage as well. And so bringing in external topsoil or turf or sod or whatever always takes, well, it can take a long time before it really feels and knits in properly with the natural subsoil, so it can affect it.
You mentioned there that they used quite a bit of machinery to mow down the dunescape there in relation to just lowering the profile and making it playable. Well, one thing, it's 20 odd years since I last played Waterville. The memory I have of it is it's somewhat engineered or feels engineered in a sort of Birkdale sort of way, in that the fairways themselves are quite flat. Am I remembering that properly?
I, yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic golf course on a fantastic piece of land. Um, you could argue that maybe some of the tie-ins aren't as natural into the natural dune land. I don't know if that was. I never actually played it as the original Hackett design. I only played it once Fazio had done the work down there.
Me too. I have no notion of the Hackett
Yeah.
variant.
I mean, I know what Fazio did down there. I can see, like, so you can see the shaping from Fazio around the greens.
Mm.
So I don't know, necessarily what was there as green sites beforehand. I do know Fazio obviously brought in a new sixth and seventh hole. Hackett had this little par three, seventh, I think, before, which I believe was a relatively mundane hole with a little moat or pond, which actually is a bit of a Hackett staple. He seemed to have little ponds around a few of his courses, just from a drainage point of view. But they got rid of that. So I think the Fazio improvements in the routing on 6 and 7 were, by all accounts, were a considerable improvement.
And the Mass Hall, of course, is that was a Hackett Hall, yeah.
Yeah, it was absolutely. So the Mass hole is the 12th. It comes after Tranquility, which is a long par 5 11th, which a lot of people state as one of their favourite holes or one of the best holes in Ireland. But the Mass hole is a par 3 over a chasm to one of these Hackett elevated greens, and it's so named because in the days when maybe Irish Catholicism was a little bit needing to be practiced a little bit more in privacy. Um, the the chasm was used for ceremonies down there, for prayer services. So they would give mass down in that chasm. So he was adamant, being a religious man, Hackett, that he wouldn't touch anything on that. So all he did was put the green on the other side and have the tees, and nothing has been touched there.
Yeah, I seem to remember there's a Liam's Ace and a Mulcahy's Peak as two other hole names.
Yeah, Mulcahy's Peak's the 17th tee, so obviously that was Jack Mulcahy named that when he was supervising it from that April to October. So yeah, that's the 17th tee, which is spectacular. I mean, Waterville is a spectacular golf course. There's no doubt about it. Great course.
Didn't the long-standing pro Liam Higgins, that Liam's Ace is the 16th, I believe.
16th.
It's a par 4, and it's named after his hole in one.
That's correct, I believe. Yeah, that's right.
Actually, once held the world record for a long drive back in the 70s, which he hit a ball 690 odd yards on the runway at Baldonnel Aerodrome in Dublin. My head is full of useless information.
I didn't know that. 690 yards. Some of them are almost hitting that on grass now.
How much work did Fazio do on the golf course? Do you know?
Oh, it's significant. I think that was about two. I moved to Ireland in 99, 2000. I think it was not long after that, wasn't it? It was early 2000s. Um, yeah, he redesigned. Well, he rerouted 6 and 7. Most of the rest of the routing's Hackett's, but he completely rejigged the whole course from a strategic, from a bunker styling, from a reshaping of the greens point of view. Not the mass hole. So there is stuff there. He didn't go to town on everything, but it was a big job, the Fazio job.
Heading a bit north, Donegal, 1973, obviously seems to be a pretty bumper year for Hackett openings with creations at Connemara, Waterville, and now Donegal. Obviously, Pat Ruddy was to revise the Merva layout, and whilst he's very different, he's obviously Hackett's successor. The best example where the two of them came together, really, I suppose. You might touch on the differences and similarities initially between Hackett and Ruddy.
Yeah, I mean, Donegal itself, I guess, if we start there and I'll move into that. Again, it was I suppose a landed gentry estate. It was sold in the late 60s through death duties and the rest. Forestry Commission, it was bought by the state. Forestry Commission were going to forest it, but they realized that the type of trees that they wanted to put on it, sandy land didn't hold water, didn't suit. Golfers took it, leased the land, and then they brought Hackett in to build a golf course in the 70s. Um, and and he built a very long golf course. We mentioned it earlier, 7,300 yards, some super holes, again on a peninsula really, with the front nine going around the outside, and then the back nine really, routing around inside that front nine. So the front nine wraps around the back nine.
It feels like a pretty square site. Would that be in a shape wise?
Yeah, let me have a look at it again. It's you go. I suppose the most celebrated holes are 5 to 8. So you could argue the run from 5 to 11 is really good. It's a really good run from 5 to 11. But 5 to 8 are probably the most.
Five's the par three, yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Valley of Tears, I think it's called.
Yeah. The one you play up to the ridge, yeah.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
Small green, um, which collects in there. Yeah, that takes you to the coast, and then the coast kind of comes round on a right angle. So I suppose you've got two sides of a square on the coast, and you're right, the other two sides are kind of inland fences.
Well, one thing that I'm reminded of the very first time I was there, I wasn't aware you had to go through the pine forest to get there. And the
Yeah,
reveal you get when you go out of the pine forest, take a right into the, and it just opens up. It's just beautiful.
and it's real thick forest, isn't it? You
Yeah,
can
yeah.
tell that was from the Forestry Commission. It's really
Yeah, you have the blue stack mountains in the background. It's just Galway Bay. Sorry, Galway Bay, Donegal Bay.
Donegal Bay.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, it's super. It's so actually when Pat came in, so they wanted to bring, I think, did they want to bring Hackett back in? I don't know, but it was about the mid 90s anyway, and they wanted to revise it for whatever reason. I can't recall the reasons that they wanted a revamp to it. But Hackett passed in 1996, and they engaged Pat between 96 and 98 to come in and revise it. And to Pat's credit, he really did very, very little work, if any, actually, to that celebrated stretch between 5 and 8. He saw what was there, and he left that alone. He came in and and we were talking about Hackett's style not really being overly strategic from a hazard placement point of view. Really, they tended to be flanking and wing bunkers, both at greens and in the fairway. Pat, um, as we know, also likes a long course. He likes a tough course. He designs for the modern golfer. And he does bring hazards much more into your line of play. And so one of the things he was tasked with in Donegal was to maybe bring that element of penal golf is a bad way of describing it, but because it can be both strategic and penal, but hazards into the line of play and to make the course tougher, I guess.
Probably useful as we're sort of on the theme of Hackett and Ruddy, we're going to just jump forward some decade or two. I want to get a feel for the debt of gratitude, really, that golfers in general probably owe both Eddie Hackett and Pat Ruddy for their efforts at, I guess, making the clubs on the Atlantic seaboard aware that if they had land that they could build on before EU directives came into play in terms of the use of that land, and maybe a little bit of background as to as I said, the debt of gratitude that we do owe them, because but for their efforts, some of the land that was subsequently built on, predominantly in the 90s, I suppose, is when we're talking about. But for the efforts of Hackett and Ruddy, in all likelihood, some or all of that may not have panned out.
So something we need to actually remind ourselves of is that most links courses through Great Britain and Ireland were built before World War One. There was hardly anything built until Hackett after that time. We had the last course I think in Britain built was Turnberry just after World War II. The RAF had taken it through the war, and Mackenzie Ross came and completely revamped Turnberry in 1947, I think. So between 1947 and our latest kind of obsession with the Trump course in Aberdeen, Tom Doak has been up to St Patrick's, King's Barnes, Castle Stewart. Between 47 and the turn of the century, I think the only people that built links courses were Eddie Hackett and Pat Ruddy. So yeah. So that's the first thing, and they built a lot as well, and that's the thing. So as a debt of gratitude, that's the first thing we should consider. They're different people, or they have different approaches. They have similarities to them, but they've got different approaches, that's for sure. And of course, Hackett, a lot of the jobs that came to him came because they almost landed on his lap, first of all, or the community was looking for it. He always worked for very low money, low budget. They didn't have the environmental concerns at the time, so he didn't have to deal with that. When Pat started to get involved, the environmental concerns were coming. When he bought the land for the European, I think it was his third attempt to try and develop his own golf course, and he'd flown around the coast and found the best linksland to build, and he built that. As he moved towards the late 90s, he obviously worked up in Ballyliffin with Tom Craddock, and then he moved into Sandy Hills. And by the mid 90s to late 90s, environmental restrictions were coming, and Pat probably, I think it's fair to say, and he probably wouldn't mind me saying, is when he wants something, goes after it, and has a kind of forceful nature about himself. So we definitely owe a debt of gratitude to him, or golf lovers do anyway, in driving certain projects through in the late 90s as well. And we now have, of course, on top of the classic links like Portmarnock or Lahinch or County Down, Portrush, Ballybunion, we now have a whole rake of slightly more modern, excellent courses, right from Dingle in the southwest up to Rosapenna and across to Ballyliffin in the northwest, designed by Hackett and Pat Ruddy. So as golfers, we definitely owe them a debt of gratitude.
Now we're going to go take a look at Enniscrone now, another notable Hackett links course, which is located on the county border between Mayo and Sligo, halfway between Carn and County Sligo Golf Club. Maybe just by way of a little bit of historical introduction to Enniscrone. Golf formally began and can be traced back to about 1918. However, not until 1931 was the club established in a 9-hole course laid out at Bartra in 1931. By 1969, the members began looking longingly at the dunes and Eddie Hackett was approached to extend the course to 18 holes. What can you tell us about this particular project?
Yeah, so there was the 9 holes there before but effectively he both extended to 18 and completely revamped the 9 that was there, or some of those holes. So it was a brand new 18-hole golf course. Again, we're talking about the early 70s. Enniscrone, for those who know it, for the listeners who know it, and yourself, Shane, you have the relatively flat land or the very flat land that the now third 9 is on, and some of Eddie's holes were in that land. So notoriously, it started with 2 very mundane and long par 5s just to get away from where the clubhouse is, out towards the dune land. So again, for those who've played it, Eddie's course would have gone 1, 2, which were the mundane par 5s, which are now incorporated in the third 9, and then he would have gone to the current 6th hole as his third, and he would have played 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and then rejoined at 5, at the current 5. So they were all his golf holes, and great holes as well. And there were a couple more holes as you came around to 15 green, kind of took you back to the clubhouse again. And 2 of those holes are very good and have been incorporated into the third 9. And then the current first is the 16th, and 17 and 18 finish in the same way. So 12 of Hackett's, and I guess moving on, maybe it was your next question, but Hackett's course has been renovated since, or redesigned since, by Donald Steele, where he added 6 new golf holes into the dune. So in the current Enniscrone course, there are 12 of Hackett's holes and 6 of Donald Steele, or Martin Ebert, who was working for Donald Steele at the time, his holes.
And favourite holes in Enniscrone, Ali?
Oh, it's good.
Or holes of note, maybe?
Holes of note. If we take the Hackett holes, first of all, everyone loves it. There's the 12, 13, which are 2 short par 4s, one going up the hill to a plateau green, which I think is not the greatest hole. It's in great landscape.
It's not the one across the chasm.
Yeah, you kind of dogleg left. If you haven't played it before, you can actually run out without realizing where you're going off your tee shot, and then you go up to this plateau green, which is surrounded or backed by the huge dune that they say was a Viking burial mound or whatever. And then 13, though, that everyone talks about, is the short dogleg down the hill round to the right that has the traffic light that tells you where you can go. So that is blind. You can probably drive that green, but people tend to say you're stupid trying. Just get down to the corner.
I'm currently looking at a stroke saver or course planner from 2002. So that's the last time I was there.
There you go. So 13 is a great hole. 5 was actually, the green was changed by Steele, but it's a really good strategic hole. 11's a brilliant par 3. And then 17 is that great par 3 that some people complain about the fact there's a caravan site behind it, but put that out of your mind and just look at the par 3. It's a wonderful, wonderful par 3.
I suppose the main event to this conversation really has to be Cairn Golf Links. As the current consulting architect at Cairn Golf Links, I'm particularly looking forward. Sorry, you are obviously not me. I'm particularly looking forward to this part of the Hackett story. The golf links is located some 4.5 kilometers from the center of downtown Belmullet, next up New York, on the wild west coast of County Mayo. A pilgrimage to Cairn Golf Links is often spoken of in the same breath as Lofoten Links, Barnbougle Dunes, or indeed Royal Dornoch. I've not been to Lofoten or Dornoch. However, I can attest to the fact that the juice is well worth the squeeze when it comes to venturing to either Belmullet or Bridport. What can you tell us about how golf was brought to the Gaeltacht of Bail on Morted, which is the Irish for the town of Belmullet?
Glad you said that, not me. So in many ways, Cairn, you can compare back to the Connemara story that we talked about earlier. And in fact, they looked to Father Peter Waldron for their choice of architect. So when Hackett was engaged, it was on the advice of Father Waldron. It's the same kind of story because they had to rally the community and rally different landowners. Slightly different, I think, in so much as the Mangum brothers had returned from, or Michael certainly at the time had returned from London. They'd been living in the UK. Michael had bought Carn House um, and was part owner, along with 17 other farmers, of the common land, right? So there was thousands and thousands of acres of common land that was just shared between landowners. Um, and at the time, there was European funding, I believe, to the Irish government to actually divide up that common land, put barbed wire fences down it all, and give each landowner their little square parcel or parcel of land. And you know, I think Michael and Lee McAndrew and one or two others, and I don't know when Eamon, who I'll talk about in a minute, got involved, but um, they, they saw this dune land there, and they saw the opportunity to bring people into what was, Eris at the time was pretty remote. It's still remote, but it was, pretty unvisited or lacking in tourism, let's put it that way, part of the country. And I think they started Eris Tourism at the time as a not-for-profit company to try and bring money and bring tourism into the area. And their main project, an initial project, was developing this golf course and on the common land before it got divvied up, you know. So that was the start of it. That was back in the mid to late 80s. I think they started actually building in 1989. Front nine opened in 92, back nine opened in 95. Took a while to build it, and by this point, Eamon was certainly involved. Eamon was Michael's brother. Eamon had a huge love and interest in the golf course and supervised the build the whole way, and became very close to Eddie Hackett when Eddie was brought in. Worked very much hand in hand with Eddie, and had his own say in a couple of routing decisions that Eddie made as well.
Who built the course? I mean, like I'm struck by a good friend of mine traveled to Cairn to watch his son compete at the 2018 Connacht Boys Championship. And at the time, he made the comment about some of the blindness inherent in the design, and kind of more or less wondered out loud why more had not been done to address some of this unfairness, perhaps, at design and build
Yeah.
stage. You might speak to what we mean about low budget in a Hackett context. Like, what equipment did he have at his disposal? What level of expertise did the team of locals have from a course building perspective? I suspect slim to none.
Well, none there. I mean, I don't know if it was with some kind of government grant or funding, or whether it was all local raise, but it must have been with some kind of grant because they had to use local unemployed people to build the course. So some of the laborers came in, they were all from an unemployed background to get the grant, I guess. So there was no expertise in building the course. Eamon supervised it, and Eamon would have had no background in it himself either, but he had an inherent and intuitive love of it. So that definitely would have helped as they went along. Low budget, yeah. I mean, they would have had a couple of machines. There's no doubt about it. But we when we talk about the third nine in a second, we built it in exactly the same way as Hackett did. Amazingly, for a modern build, we built it in exactly the same way, and I can attest to the fact that you cannot move a lot of earth very quickly with one excavator and a 6-ton dumper truck. And you certainly cannot move a lot at Cairn because for those who haven't been there, there are no dunes like it. The scale of the dunes, they are enormous. And we might spend 2 to 3 weeks having to do a bit of, and I was always very conscious of suggesting something because I knew it would take 2 to 3 weeks to move the soil, and to the layman's eye, you'd hardly notice anything was done.
What's the range of height? I mean, in terms of highest point to lowest point, approximately.
I think it's 42 meters is the highest dune, so
Okay.
which is huge, But as you know, Shane, well, it might be 44, 42, 44. But as you know, like that's the landscape right through it. You see some golf courses. I don't think you see anywhere apart from that burial mound that I just talked about in Enniscrone that's 42 or 44 meters high. But there are no courses where you have huge dunes right through them. You have the front nine at Port Stewart. It gets a little bit more mundane in the back nine, but this is huge stuff. Even Trump and his greatest dunes of Scotland or whatever he called them, they're not as big as the ones in Carn.
Sure, it's only some people are saying that.
Yeah,
or many
yeah.
people. Look, this might be a good time to start talking about your work at Carn. I think, had Eddie planned a second 18 before he passed away?
Yeah.
You might move into sort of obviously Jim Eng and then yourself and the Kilmore Nine.
Yeah. So Eddie, this is a kind of, in fact, I wonder if I can get you a copy of the layout because it wouldn't be well seen, but Eddie died in October 1996, and just 2 or 3 months later was his last visit to Carn, and by that point he wasn't able to get himself around the dunes again, so he sat in the clubhouse and he sketched out from memory a plan to try and get another 18 onto the land. There's 280 acres there, which isn't much for 36 holes, and it certainly isn't much when you've got huge dunes to navigate in between. Now, in reality, he was digging up half of his original 18 to do it, and it didn't work. It really didn't work, but there was a desire there, and to build more golf holes because they knew there was land, fantastic land that hadn't been used. So that was 1996. How it then moved into actually happening, I'm less sure, but it wasn't long after because Jim Eng or Eng, I'm never sure myself. It's Eng, I think, who is a very well-known American architect, and had fallen in love with Carn, had joined as a life member, and had volunteered his services. I would say in 2004, because his initial routing, which I've seen, went in for a kind of planning in 2004. Now at this stage we're down to 9 holes because 18 holes never work. You're never going to get 36 holes on that land. So his initial routing went in 2004, completely different to what's there now. But between 2004 and 2007, some of those holes in skeleton form got changed by agreement between Eamon, I guess, and Jim himself. And there was a little bit of construction work done, a little bit of working, seeding on some of those holes to 2007. And then I think there was just a halt, maybe a parting of ways, or a misalignment with how to proceed, and the thing stopped in 2007.
Did you get to use any of the skeletal remains for the Kilmore? Yeah.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So, like, I was fortunate. So, I came down in 2010, rating the course. I was there on behalf of a magazine, and it was the first time I'd seen the course. And I spoke to Eamon, and I said, I believe, there was an intent to do a third 9. Would you mind walking me around the land of where the third 9's going to go? And he was delighted to do that. And he kind of let me know that actually nothing had happened. It stalled for 3 years. We seemed to hit it off, and I think it got him interested in going again to partner up with me, and we got going again. So between 2010 and 2013, and I knew because there'd been some work done and because it was low budget, I didn't have license to come in and completely tear everything up and start from afresh. But I did say to Eamon, give me 2 or 3 months to just look at the routing and to make sure that we get the best routing there. And if I'd thought that there was, if I thought we needed to tear everything up, I would have said it. But I knew that it was probably not, there was no appetite for that. So when we did it, there were some new holes that I added in to try and reduce the the walking, because there is quite a lot of up and down walking because of the elevation change. So I wanted to stay high up on the ridge. We put a new, we completely rejigged the routing of the second half of the first hole. The second hole on the Kilmore was a completely new par 3 to stay high up on the ridge, and then the third would come down in a different way. So these kind of changes were added in just to get the best routing. But you could probably say the routing's a mix of Eng, Eamon, and myself from a skeleton point of view, definitely.
Am I right in saying that was your first solo design, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, which was lucky, right? Because I came to golf design slightly later in life, not late. I'm not that old, but later, and I came out of my kind of education in it in 2009, just when everyone had stopped building golf courses. So, to have links land in 2010, 2011 as my first project was a total dream come true. I think if other architects had known that they'd really stopped at Cairn, there'd have been a lot of them knocking on the door.
So it was you, Jim, and some greenkeepers. Was that about the height of it?
Myself, so this is different gym now, right? So you've myself, well, the course was built. Like I talk about Eamon, right? Who was the director there, and supervised the work. So he was the director of Emeritus Tourism. But Eamon sat on that dumper all day, every day for years. He built the golf course with Patrick O'Connor, who was a machine operator down there on the green staff. Gary Stanley was the head greenkeeper. My partner and myself, right? I'd be down and building it as well. And then my partner, James Coughlin, who's an Irishman living in Germany at the moment. He came in to shape some of the greens up. So
he's more German than Irish, though, at this stage.
you might say that, yeah. But Jim came in. He was probably only 10 or 12 days on site, but he came in to shape some of the greens up, yeah.
The club's recently created a composite course that features both Hackett and McIntosh holes, known as the Wild Atlantic Dunes Course.
Yeah.
Can you tell us why they made the decision and how visitors can ensure that they play the Wild Atlantic Dunes Course? Do they all? I think they alternate between setups, or
yeah. So they've 27 holes now. There was the original Hackett 18, and then there was the Kilmore 9. And Eamon's vision, and Eamon stepped back now, and we've got Jerry Maguire and Fiona Toha run the golf operation really successfully and very well down there, and they're really bringing it on, which is great. Eamon himself has stepped back now, but Eamon and myself talked a lot. I think Eamon's vision was always the new 9, which went through. So for the listeners again, especially those who haven't been there, the old Hackett front 9 was on the slightly tamer land, and then the back 9 goes into I mean, it's not tame by most other course standards, but the back 9 goes into this unbelievable dunescape as it moves down towards the sea. And the third 9, the Kilmore 9, is routed through that same unbelievable landscape. So I think the feeling was always that there would be no more spectacular golf course in the world, in many ways. If you combine the new 9 with the original back 9. And what I had suggested at the time was that we can intertwine those holes to stop a couple of awkward crossovers. So, you don't just play one 9 and the other. You have those two 9s intertwined from a sequencing point of view, and it stops where you had to cross over the other 9 or the other course, and it becomes much more of a natural flow. So that's what they have now. We opened the Kilmore in 2013, but again, due to low budget, bad time in the Irish economy, they didn't really bring it on, grow it in for years. So it's only when they brought the conditioning up to the standard of the existing 18 in 2019 that we could actually introduce this Wild Atlantic Dunes golf course. And now that is, certainly from a visitor point of view, the primary golf course. And that's the way it seems to be what the visitors want to see, what they want to play. And it's the golf course that they now are looking for people to, I guess, rate and rank. But there's a lot of affinity with that original Hackett 18 as well. So they alternate the course. They just played 1 day Hackett, 1 day Wild Atlantic Dunes, 1 day Hackett, 1 day Wild Atlantic Dunes. And part of the reason there is for visitors into the region, try and get them to stay overnight, spend a bit of money in the town, in one of the 2 nice hotels there, play Hackett 1 day, play Wild Atlantic Dunes the next. So that's the intent.
You were down there over the winter doing a bit of work on the new putting green and I guess the tee pad area behind the clubhouse. You'd some interloper dumper truck driver as well annoying you for 24
That's
hours
right.
or so.
Yeah.
I hope I wasn't too much of a hindrance.
The name of Derby. There was a good photograph of you there on that dumper. No, you were a great help. We needed that extra dumper driver at that time. So thank you again for coming down and helping out. Yeah, it was great. It was great to get back down. So again, we finished the course in 2013. We had other plans, but they were all put on the back burner. And one of those plans was, because we now have 3 nines effectively leaving from the same space, it was quite tight, and it still will remain relatively tight getting out of there. But the logistics and the flow were confusing for people. And plus it never looked natural, really. They were kind of these teapods that were just sitting there, and we had a tiny little practice putting green. So the plan was always to redesign and reshape that whole area. So we did all 3 tee complexes. We tripled the size of the practice green, softened the whole thing off so you can flow directly from the green into the first tee, and it just makes it much more attractive and natural in the way that you move to the first tee and move on to the golf course.
What's next?
Well, a few things, I hope. The great thing was that's been received well. It was the first capital project we'd really done there for a few years, and we always had plans to move on. There's talk of potentially an alternate par 3. I'm not sure whether that will happen or not. We'll wait and see. But in general, what we've been concentrating on is signage, right? So right now we've just got new signage up because we were finding that the logistics, and it was needed. The logistics of getting people around was difficult. People didn't know where to go, and that was partly because of the big dunescape, but primarily because you have 2 golf courses there which share 9 holes. So, they have different numbers depending on which golf course you're on. So people are getting confused by the names: Hackett, Wild Atlantic Dunes, Kilmore. Kilmore as a name has been retired, really. You've just got the Hackett 18 or the Wild Atlantic Dunes 18. So been working on signage. We will probably work on paths. We would love to keep grass paths in most areas, but it's very difficult when you can't irrigate them. So we'll keep grass paths wherever we can, and there'll probably be some hard paths put in on some areas. So we'll need to work on that. And again, that's about access, egress, logistics, safety. And then I think we'll hopefully, assuming the club want to keep going, move into a little bit of a bunker renovation right through the 27. And that'll be redesigning and replacing into different areas some of the bunkers, just to add a little bit more aesthetic, pleasing aesthetics into it, and also some strategy. But I will add that we've 27 holes at the moment, with 37 bunkers through the 27 holes. The place doesn't need many. The dunes and the topography do all the work, so we won't be adding too many bunkers. It'll just be a few in the right places, looking the right way.
It's a pretty windy site there. It must
yeah.
You must suffer from some savage wind erosion of the bunkers.
Yeah, and that's the difficulty. So we work generally with a fairly pot style or a vetted style. There's only so much artistry you can put into them, because you can't build huge, big sand, um, natural bunkers, because they'll erode very, very quickly, unless you're happy to see them erode and to see. So in certain areas you can do that and let nature take its course. Why not? That's the way it should be. And as you know, there's a few we deliberately, or I deliberately, left open blowouts next to the 14th green in the Wild Atlantic Dunes, which was the second Kilmore.
That's the par three, yeah, with
Yeah,
Kevin Markham's favourite hole.
yeah, it is. It's a great hole, really. If I do say so myself, you know,
It is. No, but rather than, you're not blowing your own trumpet there. It's spectacular. In fact, I'm going to get a picture of it, and it may well be the feature picture for the episode.
You tee off. We left a shoulder there, which makes it semi blind green. We could easily have taken the shoulder down, but I think it would have taken some character away. So it leaves you this. It kind of teases you a little bit. So the other thing it does is it hides this huge sand blowout just to the right of the green, which you shouldn't find yourself in. But as you come up and into the kind of green site, which is an amphitheater, you see this fantastic open sand blowout to the right, and then we tied that down into a more formalized bunker. So it's it's a good hole.
The Kilmore has to be seen to be believed, and you were kind enough to walk me around it last November, and I didn't get back out to play it, but it needs to be on everybody's bucket list if they haven't got down there.
The amazing thing with the Wild Atlantic Dunes is, I'm sure you'll have some traditionalists who just think it's too much. The dunes are too much. But if you go down there with an open mind, and if you take golf for what it's supposed to be, which is just enjoyment and fun, you know, go out and enjoy yourself. There is the 18 holes are completely different to one another. In fact, you could say the 27 holes are completely different to one another. You go to many golf courses and there are bits that suddenly let you down. You know, you've gone through the exciting bit and then you go through a period of calm, which is sometimes needed, or an area where, well, that bit wasn't quite as good. Doesn't happen in Cairn. You go out and you just keep on going from one piece of drama to the next. And in fact, part of my job was I never had to look for drama. That was there. It was more about playability. So, you know, I had to almost de-dramatize sometimes just to try and get it.
Chill the fuck out.
Yeah, exactly. Just to get it playable, you know. So that was the trick. It walkable and playable. That was the first thing. I didn't need to go looking for a spectacular golf hole. I could have designed 100 of them.
I'm just interested. How long did it take you to route the 9? I mean, it's as you said, it feels like it made you work for it.
Yeah, but remember, so a lot of the routing was there. But as I said, I wanted to look at it like a blank canvas, first of all, to make sure that we got the best one. So I used quite a bit of what Eamon and Jim from a skeleton had already done, but I wanted to make sure it was the right thing. Yeah. And so from that point of view, you know, I think it was a few months into it before I even went down and I had suggested, you know, the whole change of 1, 2, and 3 to Eamon, and you know, it was a while before we finalized on what the final routing would be, or routing.
Well, we do have some Australian listeners. It has a different connotation down there. Hence the reason I say routing or routing. Routing is something else down there. Exactly.
I'll stick with routing then.
Yeah. You're currently working at Strand Hill, which obviously was a commission you got after Cairn. Yeah. Just wondering if Eddie Hackett did any work down there.
Now, you would think I would know. You would think they would know. That's more to the point. But I hear conflicting stories. I speak to Jason, who's the head greenkeeper down there, and he says, "Oh, yeah, no, he definitely, you know, added 9, or he definitely added these holes here." Then I read Richard Finney's book, and Richard had spoken to Eddie Hackett, and Eddie said he just came in and blessed Martin Nyland's design on 3 or 4 of the holes around 16, 17, 18, you know. So that said, you look at a hole like 15 and you think that looks quintessential Hackett. So I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to investigate that more, Shane, because it's not that long ago. Someone needs to actually know. What I heard was that really the extension from 9 to 18 was done by the locals, and they really just designed and built it themselves and then retired to the clubhouse for a few pints every night.
And when you say that 15 is quintessentially Hackett, what do you mean?
Well, I mean it's quintessentially Hackett in it's naturally rooted through big dune land to an elevated kind of shelf green. And Hackett did a lot of those. You could argue the fourth would be the same, but it just feels like it doesn't feel like a modern designed links hole. Let's put it that way. It feels like a Hackett designed hole. It
Okay.
probably isn't, but it could be.
But that's a compliment, though, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. It's not meant any other way. Yeah.
Yeah. You were engaged by the club in 2016. What have you been at since that engagement?
So we've done the club own 70 acres of dune land behind the existing course,
Which they're not using.
which they're not using and can't really use. Okay, so um, the for those who don't know Strand Hill, it's magnificent. But it's on 95 acres. So it's wedged in between the Atlantic on one side, Cullinamore Bay on the other side, the Strand. So two sides of water. Knocknarea, that great Queen Maeve mountain, overshadows it on the third side, and then on the fourth side there's this huge dune, which is called Shelley Valley on the backside of that. This great dune on the backside of that. So it's got four very distinct sides to it, which are all fantastic, and it's got really cool golf holes, really great golf holes in there. But a funny, quirky mix of some natural stuff, some very rudimentary built stuff, probably by the members in the 80s, and then just some stuff that doesn't work. So, so the first thing I did when I came in was to suggest that the first thing we did was we completely redid the bunker scheme on the course. So they were ugly bunkers. They were in the wrong place. There were 68 of them. We've taken it down to 48, much more artistically designed, much more strategic golf hole, strategically placed, and just much more attractive. Made a huge difference to it. What else have we been doing? We've also tried to widen, because it's on 90 acres, you've got to try and make it feel as big as possible. So we've been widening fairways, changing the mowing lines, and that's made a huge difference in itself. Taking out a little bit of sometimes taking out a little bit of dune land or mounds just to give that better view, to give a feeling of scale. Since then we've been redesigning all of the tees. We've been bringing some fairways forward. We're going to do a little bit of green work. What we haven't been able to do, and maybe we'll never get to do it, I hope we do, because it's a very sensible plan, is use any of the 69 or 70 acres they've got at the back. My plan had not been to go and use a majority of that. It had just been at the back of the fourth hole, we go up into a kind of dune plateau before it falls down into the rest of the 70 acres. And my plan had just been to use that plateau. It's about 2 or 3 acres. I don't think it's even 2 or 3 acres. It's probably 1.5, 2 acres, to extend the fourth hole into a par 5 and then to bring a brand new par 3 back. And that would ease out some of the external safety problems that the course has. We haven't quite got there yet with National Parks and Wildlife. It's a shame, because it's a very, very environmentally sensitive and environmentally friendly plan. So maybe one of those days we'll get there. But as it is, we're just driving on to finish stuff on the existing course.
I get back to Hackett for a moment. I believe he was engaged in some capacity at Rosapenna.
Yes.
Both on what is now the St. Patrick's site that Tom Doak and the Renaissance team built upon, but also on the other side of the fence with the Caseys and perhaps the precursor to Pat Ruddy's work on Sandy Hills. What can you tell us about that?
That's correct. And not a lot of, we'll start with Rosapenna because not a lot of people, well, not that many people probably realize it because it wasn't long in existence. But you had the original Rosapenna course. So the Caseys bought it in 81, the land and the hotel, and developed from there. And they had the 18-hole golf course there, which had been designed a little bit of old Tom Morris, or originally by old Tom Morris. Then
which at the time was nine in the valley and 9 up around the hill.
Yeah, that's right.
Over the road with those crazy drives, which I actually did play once back in the early noughties.
There you go. Yeah.
Bizarre.
So you had that, which some of those holes are now called the Coast Guard 9. But and that is what brought Hackett in. So the original course, the Valley 9, was a bit of old Tom, bit of Varden and Braid, quite a lot of Harry Colt in there actually, which isn't realised. And some great cracking holes in that Valley 9, and they're still there. But at the time, you had a couple of drives that went over the road. Now, the course used to play away from the hotel. The pavilion's been, the clubhouse has been built since, but the original course played from the hotel. So you actually had 10 holes. You had one coming up from the hotel, and then you played the Valley 9, which is now the back 9 of the Old Tom, to their 18th. So you came round to where the pavilion now is at the 10th green. And then the 11th headed back across the road up the hill to the Coast Guard 9. And they had to get rid of that because there was too much traffic. And if you've been down there since, you would go, that's mad that we were hitting golf balls across this road, you know. But there was too much traffic. So they brought Eddie in to build 8 new holes, effectively, in 95. So, you know, again, pretty close to when he died. He was brought in to build 8 new holes, and they built them. So off the current 18th on Old Tom, which is by the pavilion, that was the 10th. And then you went out, for those who know it, the Sandy Hills course is slightly inland from the Valley 9, but it's up in big, kind of high elevated dunes. So Eddie's holes started out there, the Sandy Hills land, would have been 11, 12, 13, which is kind of along the same route as Pat's first, second, and third on the Sandy Hills. And then I think Eddie turned inland again, maybe along the same route as Pat's 15th, I think. And then he came in on what is approximately the skeleton of 7, 8, 9 of the current Old Tom course. And then the final 18th is long gone, which was a hole which would have connected the 9th green on Old Tom back to the hotel. So Eddie's 18 was there and in play for about 3 or 4 years, maybe 95 to 99. And then, of course, enter Pat Ruddy, who saw the land. Maybe they'd got Pat in for another reason, but Pat then saw the land and, you know, said, well, look, you've got to build 18 here. And then the environmental restrictions were coming in as well. So, you know, Pat talked to the Caseys and convinced, you know, thankfully Frank to build another 18, which became the Sandy Hills, and then to build this 9 holes, or some of the 9 holes that has now become the front 9 of the Old Tom Morris, and the Valley 9 has become the back 9.
And then, of course, obviously across the fence originally was a development for the owner of the Carrigart Hotel, one Dermot Walsh, who developed 36 actually after he couldn't put a caravan park on the,
That's right.
which is essentially the end of the valley, I suppose, if you like, over the barrier dune.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, I think when the Caseys and Frank Jr., you know, when they bought the Patrick's land, they thought originally about, you know, extending that Valley 9 out into the St. Patrick's land, you know, before, and I'm sure we'll get to Tom, before Tom came in. And
needless to say, the Mara McGorgan was a Hackett, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's right. But, you know, Hackett came in, or Dermot Walsh would have hired Hackett, and again, it was 95. and Hackett built the first course with Joanne O'Hare helping him.
Mhm.
Now, and the first course, which I'm not going to pronounce, but you just did, is again, it was another 7,000-yard beast, and then Joanne herself, who was, I think, assistant pro at Royal County Down, is that correct? She took the lead on the Tramore course, which was the second course, which was under 6,000 yards, but had some of the best land, and they put 36 holes there. And I think that's the only links course anywhere ever designed by a woman.
And one and two, at least, bear remarkable resemblance to the current one and two in. Well, actually, beg your pardon. Yeah, sorry. The current one and two bear remarkable resemblance to two of the holes on the Tramore course,
Correct.
because they're essentially through the same corridor. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, it's particularly the second on Tom's course on the current St Patrick's course is very similar to what was there. Clyde scraped a couple of, as we talked about in another podcast, Clyde scraped a couple of bunkers in. They obviously reshaped the green, but I don't think they didn't even lift the sod on the fairway. That was just mown out. So very, very similar. The first goes into the same green site that was there. The orientation of the tee shot is a bit different, and they lowered the ridge at about the landing zone. So they've done a bit of work on the first, but it's pretty similar. Yeah.
Yeah, for those that haven't listened, I think it's episode 4. We do a deep dive with Frank Casey Jr., Ali, and Clyde Johnson, who would have been one of the lead shapers in the project. And Clyde covers quite extensively the June shoulder surgery that took place on the second to basically knock back the dune and replace the marram and the scraw. Quite an interesting conversation if you're into your geekery. Yeah, maybe if we take a look at some of the courses that Hackett didn't touch, it's interesting in prep for this evening when, I mean, he must have been talking to Ballybunion and Tralee, let's say, but essentially gave them the advice to go down a different avenue with obviously Robert Trent Jones in terms of Ballybunion and Arnold Palmer and Ed C in terms of Tralee.
It's amazing, isn't it? Can you imagine a modern day architect being offered a links commission and saying, you don't want me, you want someone else? I just cannot imagine anyone who would say that now. So, Hackett in his I guess humble and pious way, said to them, if you want to actually earn money out of this, it was coming into the 80s, go with these big name American architects and it'll stand you in good stead. So yeah, he could have designed Ballybunion, Cashin and Tralee as well.
I hear there might be plans afoot for the Cashin. Our mutual friend, who I won't name, but you know who I'm talking about, suggested that there was some plans afoot for that.
Yeah, I believe it all. I don't know too much about it. We'll wait and see what happens. It wouldn't surprise me. No one seems to want to stand still at the moment, and enjoy what they have. They want to keep.
Yeah, interested in that you've given me a nice sachet into the local news. I know you've recently been casting your eye over the Mackenzie and Ebert proposals for County Louth Golf Club that members of Baltray are currently considering.
Yeah.
For listeners that may have missed the news, and as a huge Tom Simpson fan, first of all, I suppose that's important to say, you might tell us about the proposals or what you've seen, the specific revisions, and we might even get something about the merit of the suggestions, but don't feel you have to answer that question.
Well, I think you have to realize, first of all, that, usually architects are approached by clubs because clubs have a desire to do something. Now, whether that's correct or not is the first question. But obviously Baltray wanted to deal with, or County Louth wanted to deal with a couple of issues. And they approached Martin Ebert. And so Martin Ebert's responded to that. Some of the issues were, I think, around. I need to look at the brief again. But some of the issues were, around
safety
issues. Particularly, I think they felt that balls were going into the car park from the 10th tee. So Ebert's dealt with that quite well. It could have been dealt with exactly the same hole and just a slight redesign. But what he's actually done is he's flipped over the 10th tees and the first tees, which actually goes back to what Simpson had designed in the first place. So he's actually, I wouldn't call it a restoration, but his suggestion actually flips the tees over to what Simpson had in the first place. So there's things in there that are certainly good suggestions and warranted, and certainly meet the brief that County Louth were looking for. There are, of course, as you know, what I think suggestions that I believe are a step too far, and why I just think I think, and I'm not just talking about County Louth here, but I think work gets suggested that doesn't need to get suggested. Quite often, all that's needed are a couple of small things, and suddenly we have 2 or 3 or 4 new holes, and greens getting reshaped left, right, and centre, and everything getting done. And that happens a little bit too much on some of our courses at the moment. Maybe the clubs want it. Maybe their hand is just kind of, maybe not forced, but they get kind of, I suppose they see the bright lights and they just go with the changes sometimes. But I think that there's too much change on our links courses that isn't needed.
Interesting. I mean, in Ireland and the UK, obviously through state-sponsored national trust, our built environment is recognised and protected. In light of that, for building, how important do you think are the specific design elements of courses such as County Louth, Portmarnock, and Royal Portrush or Ballybunion to the built heritage and history of golf in these islands? I know that's probably you probably don't ever see that a preservation order would go in for a golf club, but I suppose it plays into, and I'm not trying to point a finger at Baltray as an example, but do you think that the members in places like that understand what they have?
I'm sure some of them do, and I'm sure a lot of them don't. It's not practical, of course. It's completely idealistic to say that you can put preservation orders or like national monuments on golf courses. But if you could, then I think you should be picking 2 or 3 examples of well-known architects' works and saying, well, these 2 or 3 should be held and have a higher burden of proof, I guess, to get over making changes.
You said something very interesting to me yesterday on the phone.
Yeah.
And I think you want to put something on the record in terms of Mr. Ruddy.
Yeah. Well, what I said to you on the phone is, if you had that idealistic situation, then like I would hate to see the European changed, right? So, I'd hate the idea of someone coming in and changing the European. People have different opinions of the European. It's a different style of links course, but that doesn't give everyone the right to come in and change it. It's Pat's baby. He's built it. He loves it. I love it, by the way, as well. And, if you're going to put like heritage on golf courses, then let's ensure that one of Pat's courses is kept there relatively untouched, and that's the European. So I'd say the same. Then you go to Simpson. I'd say the same with 1 or 2 of Simpson's bits of work, or 1 or 2 of Colts or Mackenzie's. And that's just the architects. Then there's other reasons that you might want to not touch a golf course. Obviously, the old courses in St Andrews is one where I think you should be jumping a higher hurdle to make any changes on that.
Sure, and we've spoken previously about creeping homogenization of golf course design.
Yeah.
Characterized almost maybe by groupthink, and so that no one ever got fired for buying IBM mentality.
Yeah.
Despite the obvious quality of the work of the people that I'm talking about, should we be concerned that one design firm seems to be hoovering up many of the current Tier 1 commissions?
Yes, but I think even before you get to talking about one design firm, the natural order of things is, if you change more towards the conservative. So In other words, no one changes their course and comes in and builds a big dune that you can hit a blind shot over, or a quirky feature here or there. They change their course to make it more in line with other courses or championships or this or that. And in itself, with our links courses, bit by bit, that tends to get rid of some of the crinkles and the creases on courses that make them so individual. So I think naturally, by committees or by people wanting to change golf courses, they move more and more towards homogenized looking courses, and that's a crying shame on links golf. And then, look, you know, more power to any design firm that picks up a lot of work, but you can only put your attention to so much in an impassioned fashion. You can't do that when you've got 30 golf courses on the go, and really all linksland is different. You should be bringing different solutions to different pieces of land, and to do that you kind of have to understand the land well, and to understand the land well you have to spend a bit of time with it.
So where do you think the future of links design is? Is it in detailing? Is it the conservation approach that you're talking about? I mean, obviously, I know you don't. I know sort of golf in general is looking down the barrel of somewhere actually that the greenkeeping teams in the Netherlands have already moved to, in terms of limited or no fungicide, pesticide, and chemical applications. Do we think that the expectation of uber conditioning is sustainable, or like,
No,
where are we?
I don't think so. Well, no, there's going to be challenges in that fashion, of course, because of limits on the things you talk about. Where are we going with links design? I mean, you could argue that I sound a little bit hypocritical here, because I'm talking about not changing courses, and here I am down in Strand Hill. But it maybe didn't have the design. Let me put it this way: it didn't have the design pedigree that a County Louth has with Tom Simpson, or a Ross's Point has with Harry Colt. Bringing it back to Hackett, it's modern design, or good modern design, is very different than Hackett's era. Hackett designed, it got built by the locals. Part of that was budget, but his eye really wasn't on the detail. It was on the big picture of the routing. Good modern designers now are all over the detail. They're all over the artistry. They're all over the aesthetics and how to tie landscapes in so that they look very natural. You know that from seeing Tom's work up in St. Patrick's. But that is the difference, I think, between great designers on linksland now and maybe the past is how good they are at building, how good they are at detailing stuff. But the key is to not do too much. So, know what is enough for the land, know what is enough for the golf course you're working on, and don't do more. And that's the key. It's always the key. Minimalism is, from that point of view, is the key. And it frustrates me no end when I see more than is necessary being suggested at places.
Again, as I said to you yesterday, I can't quite believe you've been on the show twice already, and you haven't got asked the final two questions. So we're going to rectify that before I let you tootle off. So please tell us where your 5-ish bucket list courses are and why you've chosen them. You can interpret this question however you wish. The number 5 is only a rough guide to the quantity of courses that you can nominate.
Oh, I didn't even prep for this.
Well, there you go.
I wasn't expecting again, or I should have been expecting. But are these courses that I haven't?
You can play it. You can have played them, not played them, whatever. You interpret it however you want.
Yeah. Okay.
You want to go back to the loop, though, maybe as the first.
Yeah,
section.
that's a good point. Yeah. Thanks for prompting me on stuff I should know myself.
No problem.
The
No
loop.
problem.
for those who don't know the Loop, I went there with Robin Heisman, my friend Robin, who's an architect, and Sean Arble there in August, and we played the Loop. And the Loop is a Tom Doak design, and I've seen a few of Tom's courses, but not that many. And it's reversible. So they play the red 18 one day, the black 18 the next day. It's a bit like we were talking with the Wild Atlantic Dunes and the Hackett, except it's fully reversible. And it's on great sandy soil. It's pretty tame-ish landscape, subtle landscape. It's just, I love the landscape. And the design is superb because even though I knew how good Tom's crew were at building and designing, I really didn't expect to go there and when I'm playing one course, not have any sign whatsoever of it the other way around. I was expecting to see tees hidden for the other course, hidden in the woods or in the forest or whatever. It's not the way. The tees are just little poles in the ground, shaped in from the shapers as flat bits that tie perfectly into the fairways, and you wouldn't even know that they're used as a tee on a different day. And then to bring greens in that you can approach from two different ways. Oh, it was wonderful. So, for me as a design feat, the Loop is, I suppose, the best I've seen. Certainly the best modern design I've seen from a purely design point of view, an architectural point of view.
Okay, so technically that's two, but we'll call that one.
Well, I'm going to struggle now. You're going to have to prompt me on four others.
Well, did any of them come from that trip? You were where were you? Crystal Downs, Chicago Golf Club. You were on the bloody trip. Didn't even invite me. So how am I remembering them?
Shore Acres was
Sure.
Is a perfect example of Seth Rayner getting the most out of a routing on a site. So relatively flat site, but it's got these barrancas or ravines running through it. He uses the ravines, I think, on 11 out of the 18 holes. Is that right? I think 11 out of the 18 holes, wow. and he uses them in 11 different ways. So it's an amazing routing to use that one major or those major natural features in such a variety of ways. And that's what good routing is, managing to use those natural features in different ways is always an indicator of a great routing.
The same features in different ways in terms of just sort of stacking them.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's fantastic. I'm not going to go 5 bucket list, but if I run through some of my favorite links courses, I'll stay out of Ireland. So,
Well, actually, maybe what do you look for in your favorite golf courses? As a different question, and we'll then get on to your favorite links courses.
What do I look for in my favorite? I look for a sense of place, a sense of itself, right? In other words, it has to feel completely at one with where it is. Variety is key, but consistency for me is also key. I like the elegance when it comes to linksland. I tend to like the so you've got the huge dunes at Carn, magnificent, wonderful. But I like the elegance of a Portrush where you have wonderful fairway undulations with kind of mid-level dunes. It's just a very elegant golf course. So I like elegant links courses. I think Royal St George's is another example, Sandwich, and I think Dornoch is another example. Then of the smaller ones, I love a course like, and you could call this one on my bucket list, I love a course like Machrihanish. You're at the end of nowhere and you're down there, and it's just wonderful to play. So those kind of links courses I really enjoy, the elegance of those undulations.
Finally, our last question. You might recommend 2 golf books that could augment any golf tragic's personal golf library.
Well, if you want to be a proper golf architecture tragic, then you go back to those 1920s books by MacDonald or Mackenzie. which are really a cornerstone of any golf designer's library. But my favorite one, and again, because he probably inspired me more than any other architect, is Tom Simpson. So Simpson and Weathered's, the architectural side of golf is super. It's got Simpson sketches in it. It's got his real strategic thinking, the way he lays out golf holes. And, he was a character, Tom Simpson, with his Rolls Royce.
Surely the second book is probably Brendan Cashell's The History of Portmarnock Golf Club.
Well, I would recommend that to anyone. It's a most wonderful achievement by Brendan. Obviously, it's quite niche. You have to be interested in Portmarnock, but it gives a load of great photographs and detail.
Available to purchase through Francis's shop, Francis's pro shop.
It is indeed, yeah. It is indeed. So yeah, that's obviously good. I think we'll go with a much more basic one for those who are just kind of dipping their toes into golf course architecture. Is the World Atlas of Golf. That was what got so many people into golf design, particularly the last revision, which has the silver cover, which was by different editors and contributors. But it just shows you right around the globe a bunch of great classic golf courses. It has, diagrams of routing maps. It gives you a little bit about strategic golf versus the history of golf design. And it's a real excellent entry point to get people interested in golf courses. I would imagine most people listening to this are well beyond that, in fairness. But it's for a lot of people, it's a great entry point.
So I just, from a listener's perspective, the last hour or so has motivated the listener to explore how they might revise, redesign, or rebuild their golf course. How can interested parties make contact with McIntosh Design?
I'm quite low profile, Shane. I don't have much of an online presence, but
still no online presence.
Still no online presence. They can get me through you or macintosh.golf@gmail.com.
Excellent. Well, look, Ali, as usual, I'm very grateful for you sharing some of your very valuable time and expertise this evening. It was great learning more about Eddie Hackett, an undoubted candidate for the title of Father of Golf Course Architecture in Ireland. Go easy and thank you.
Thanks very much, Shane. Thanks for having me again. All the best. See you.
Many thanks for tuning in. As usual, you can find us online at firmandfast.golf or on Twitter at firmandfastgolf. Please continue to like, subscribe, and comment. It really is appreciated. Until the next time, happy golfing.